So, as you're talking about, what is the objective? What is it that, like, in a 30-minute news hour? So one of the things that I noticed too was when I watched the news in Jacksonville, when I watched the news, here locally in Atlanta, and when I watched the Univision Atlanta affiliate, something also, kind of stuck out to me, and it was the stories, the timing of the stories and the placement of the stories with the news, and when they talked about crime and when they talked about different things, kind of fit into the same format. It's almost like, I guess they have a
almost makes it sound like a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, like a template, like,
I think
have you noticed that?
What usually happens is when you're looking at your standard 30-minute news segment, in the first 10 minutes is going to be your biggest local stories mixed in with maybe one or two national stories. So we know that sensationalism sells. So what is that most sensational local story? And a lot of times, if all else fails, it seems like it's going to gravitate towards crime, because that plays into fear and all that type of stuff.
Crime and corruption.
And so you know that any of those types of adverse or negative stories are going to come out first. What's going on locally. Then it might be a little hint of whatever is the main hot issue nationally, and maybe the main hot issue internationally. If they don't go to a commercial break or segment, then maybe they'll do the news. I mean, not the news, but they'll maybe do the weather. Then that next cycle is going to be more local stuff, maybe sprinkle in, but it's going to be more local stuff, then stop. Then it'll be your sports, and then it'll be your recap of the weather, and that's pretty much it. But what ends up happening a lot of times is whatever's hot can shift big time. So let's say if it's an election cycle, let's say if there's a major announcement coming from City Hall or from the state capitol or something, there might be a switch. Or if there was some type of shootout or standoff or Amber Alert situation or something along those lines. But in general, it's almost like, the first third is going to be local and whatever is the most negative local story. Right. Sprinkled in with maybe a national, maybe international, then commercial break. If they don't go to commercial break, then it'll be a quick snippet.
So let me ask you this. So hopefully I can think of it all. So some of the stuff I was thinking while I was, laid up was some of the format I was seeing was, black criminals. Mm-hmm. Then I saw, a white woman in need. That either needed to where
I'm not laughing if someone in need.
No, not in need, but like had been kidnapped or something bad had happened to them, or needed a kidney, or just something where a white person, a woman, looked like they needed saving. Right? Okay. And then I saw, of course, the normal sports, the normal weather, and then sometimes I saw a dog story. And I'm thinking, a dog story? There's so much good stuff going on out here.
So in other words, there's nothing about what, let's say, the faith-based community is doing or the nonprofit. The only time it seems like they talk about faith-based or nonprofit or community is going to be when it's somebody in government doing it or an entertainer. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but there are regular everyday people doing good stuff all the time.
There are lots of people.
All the time. And they don't get that platform unless somebody famous is involved, which then leads you to believe that the only time you support that type of stuff is if there's someone famous versus there could be someone right there in your neighborhood or right there at your place of work or what have you that's really doing some quality stuff. But because, again, you take based on what you see versus taking a little bit of time to research, oh, wow, here's someone who does this type of work for financial literacy or what have you. Right. So it's just kind of, but what it ultimately comes down to is those news directors make the final call. And one of the questions you have to ask yourself with the news directors is, number one, what is your interest? Right. Because if your interest is trying to show as balanced as possible, it doesn't mean you're not going to tell about the stories of crime, but maybe you'll do a little bit less and free up time to talk about what positive things are going on, or here's an area of need, and it's not just because the mayor or the city councilman or Boo Boo the Fool is doing something. Like, there's real everyday people doing some real meaningful things. Give them a platform, just like you give all these other people a platform. So the first thing is, what is really your interest? Right. And I'll just go ahead and take it a step further, and I'll go ahead and take a shot. But look at the ethnic makeup of those people who are in those roles and ask yourself the question, do they really have a vested interest in going outside of their normal box? You have to honestly ask that question, because I'll just go ahead and say it. If I'm a Caucasian male, what lens am I really looking through in order to tell or share a story? You have to honestly ask that question and think about it. Because if my lens is going to be based on my experience, and let's say my experience has a few snippets here and there of people who are different from me, let's say ethnic background, socioeconomic status, and what have you, I'm going to report based on what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, but isn't that antiquated at this point? I'm going
to answer that question. It should be. But based on what we're seeing, it's clear that there are people holding on to those vestiges that really don't align with what the reality is.
When I think of the population of Atlanta and what the racial makeup is of our city, and again, without getting into statistics, when I look at the news, I don't see our city reflected. Our city is more than just black and white. Right? And immigrants, Hispanic immigrants, right? It's so much more than that. And that's one of the reasons why I love going back up north or going to Chicago, because, one, when you look at the news, and I know it's, we go back and forth about a lot of stuff, but I love seeing different journalists, different newscasters of many different races. And I feel that here we're kind of limited.
But again, you have to ask yourself the question, who is making that decision? Okay. And they're going to make decisions based on what they feel align with what is best practice. But what they feel might not be the reality. So now what happens is you're still using, let's say, a 1970s model. And here we are in 2017. But you think about it, you have to look at not only through, let's say, ethnic background, generational. If I'm a 65, 70-year-old decision maker, and that's not to knock our veteran people who have been there, but they're going to go ahead and make decisions that are grounded in how they've always done things. And the only time they'll make a change is if they are pressed to make it, or they just don't care and they know they're going out anyway.
Well, when we come back, let's talk about exactly how they could be pressed to make that change. All right, we'll be right back.